So in the month following the referendum, a referendum in which most EU citizens had no voice, when it became clear that the vote leaves promise that nothing would have changed for us hadn't been maintained, and we became bargaining chips for the government, I thought of Margaret Mead's powerful words: never doubt that a small, committed group of citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing it ever has. So I started asking myself, why not create a group of citizens and collect our stories in a book so that they could become a much stronger voice and finally be heard? And so I did. The first night we were 5. Veronique, the co-editor, is here, Cozy, and other members of the group. After a month, we were 1,000, and the group has kept growing. You may wonder why a book. Because many battles have been won with books, and books remain as a historic memory of what happened. As the Romans used to say, verba volant, scripta manent, spoken words fly away, written ones remain. And yesterday, for instance, the French Senator Olivier Cadic, in presenting the book to the French Senate, said, "The book will go down in history and explain to future generations the distress felt by Europeans in the UK because of Brexit." So the founding idea of In Limbo was to give a voice to ordinary citizens who, until the dreadful referendum campaign, which turned us into the other, had been living, working and paying taxes in the UK, at times for decades, feeling completely integrated. After the referendum, on the contrary, we'd gone from becoming bargaining chips for the government to being called citizens of nowhere, queue jumpers, to being told that we had considered this place our home for too long. The language has been often so dehumanizing that In Limbo wanted to offer an alternative to this hostile climate by creating a safe place, an oasis of fraternity, to use the words, borrow the words from the French sociologist Edgar Morin, and where people could find friendship and support. And as a matter of fact, our group is a sort of mini Europe, proving that a Europe of people in truth does exist. As the Dalai Lama said, compassion is the radicalism of our times, and we've seen too little around us in these past years. In Limbo instead focuses on the human side, on the human impact of Brexit, an impact which had been completely overlooked in the referendum campaign, even from the Remain side, in the belief that people are not numbers, they're not statistics, but individuals with a unique story to share. But after 4 years, where are we now? We've gone from that hollow promise of vote leave to settled status. People have been forced to apply, not register, to stay in their own home, a home sometimes of 50 years or more. And no wonder many of us feel they no longer belong, like they feel like unwelcome guests. And from the stories we recently received, collected for the book, it looks like there's still many unresolved issues with settled status. This is why a new, expanded and revised edition of In Limbo has become necessary, with many more testimonies and a whole new chapter called Unsettled Status, because that's how most of us feel, unsettled. In this new chapter, one of the main concerns people have is the lack of physical document, given settled status is only a digital status, and the printed letter is in no way proof of status, meaning that we have nothing to show to landlords, to employers, banks, hospitals, etc. Something which will inevitably create discrimination, and it already is. Just to give you a few examples, a Spanish man writes, "I attended a job interview today. It was for a graphic designer position in a marketing agency. First question, just after shaking hands. Did you take British citizenship? A bit perplexed, I answered, no, why? I said I was an EU citizen and didn't need it so far. After I elaborated on settled status, he did not look very convinced. This affected negatively on my performance for the rest of the interview. Probably recruiters are unsure how to deal with the current situation." Last week, a lady told me that the day she discovered she had cancer, she got a call from the hospital asking her to prove whether she was eligible for her treatment, adding, a worry to another. And I heard two similar testimonies on the same day. Last week, a Danish man was stopped at the Ryanair desk when returning to the UK, was asked to show a document proving, his right to stay. He explained he didn't need to because we're still in the transition period. Yet he had settled status, but he couldn't show it because it's just a number. Imagine if the system was down and he really needed one. It took a lot of convincing, but in the end he was able to fly. But these are examples showing why a physical document is extremely important. Another issue emerging from the testimonies, and a very worrying one, is the fact that many citizens are likely to miss the hard deadline, particularly the most vulnerable ones. Many don't seem to know they must apply or don't have access to a computer. Ivana from Slovakia writes, "Today I met an elderly lady of 82, and bless her, she had no idea about settled status. She thought she didn't have to do anything because she was married to a British man, had a British son, bought a house here, and had been in the UK for a very long time. I'm very worried about the lack of information elderly people are receiving." But even people of working age often have no idea they need to apply. Take the example of Mihai, a taxi driver I met going to Heathrow, who was convinced that his national insurance number was sufficient for him, for his wife, and for his daughter. How many children, elderly or vulnerable people, such as victims of domestic abuse, and we know a few, minorities such as the Roma community, will be left out? These are all people at real risk of becoming unlawful residents after June 2021. If people fail to apply, they will experience the full force of the hostile environment. Tens of thousands of people might be left without legal status overnight. In January, we were reassured that there will be no automatic deportations. So we've gone from nothing will change to speaking of deportations as if this were the new normal. The reality is that these people won't be able to access the NHS, apply for jobs, rent, so they might spontaneously leave or self-deport. So the serious implications of settled status are now there for us all to see. And unless something changes, we heard this morning that a new legislation might pass, but it's all very, very vague. We will slowly but inexorably head towards a much bigger Windrush, as Yvette Cooper called it, a Windrush on steroids. And how many have been offered a wrong status, but are too afraid to challenge the Home Office? There are also many non-EU nationals married to EU citizens whose applications are at the bottom of the pile. What's going to happen with these? An even more worrying trend is the number of refusals, which has gone from barely any to 16,600 just this year. It's a long shot from nothing will change for us, isn't it? Many also worried that by having to inform the Home Office of any change, when they move or their passport expires, they will have to start a lifelong relationship with the Home Office, where mistakes could happen. Imagine the vulnerable ones having to deal with this over the years. How is this going to work? And these mistakes could lead to problems similar to those the Windrush experienced. So, no, settled status hasn't really reduced the anxiety people felt before the scheme started. And it isn't as easy as opening an online account, as Amberad told us. On the contrary, I've never come across more people, academics, scientists, nurses, families, wanting to leave. Even the so-called brightest and the best aren't dying to stay, are they? So these are some of the issues you will find in a new edition of In Limbo. But In Limbo is, the story of our painful journey. When Article 50 was triggered, I thought of Dante's words. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita mi ritrovai per una selva oscura che la diritta via era smarrita. In the middle of the journey of my life, I found myself in a dark forest as the straightforward path had been lost. So this is the limbo we've been plunged into. a place of confusion, worry, anger, betrayal, fear, as you will hear from, if you read these testimonies. But at the end of the Inferno, Dante says, "E quindi uscimmo a riveder le stelle," and hence we came forth to behold the stars. But in order to see the stars, we can't sit idle. We need a collective effort. And I know many of you feel tired, you feel discouraged, but change is always possible, and we should never tire of reminding this government day in and day out that what is happening to us is wrong, and it is greatly affecting people's lives on both sides of the channel. This book and In Limbo too prove it. I also believe that we should feel the responsibility of becoming the voice of the most vulnerable ones, of those who have no voice. The moment such voices are no longer heard, or nobody speaks up for them, is when the new Windrush could happen under our noses in total indifference. So don't underestimate the power of the written word and that of your voice. So to finish, Mahatma Gandhi used to say, "The future depends on what you do today. Be the change you want to see in the world." So let's keep writing. Let's keep sending books to our MPs or those who can make a difference. And above all, let's keep fighting for our rights, which are always a conquest. Thank you very much for listening.